a LiSTNR production.
Hey, Bension Siebert here with The Briefing. The world's first female airplane hijacker wants to come to Australia. Leila Khaled, who turns 80 next month and remains on the National Committee for the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, is set to appear as a speaker at Green Left's Ecosocialism 2024 conference in Western Australia in June. But her billing has sparked anger from critics and some Jewish groups who argue she should not be allowed into the country because of her historical involvement in terrorist activity and her more recent comments describing terrorist group Hamas as freedom fighters. Khaled is not the only controversial public figure who's faced a potential ban from Australia. Others banned or kicked out of the country include Novak Djokovic, Chelsea Manning and Chris Brown. So in today's episode, what's behind these decisions to ban or allow some of these people into Australia? I'm joined now by LiSTNR's Investigations Editor, Clair Weaver, to unpack all of this. Hi, Claire.
Hi, Bension.
So the world's first female hijacker wants to come to Australia. Tell us what we know about Leila Khaled. Who is she? What did she do? Why does she want to come to Australia?
Yeah, sure. So Leila Khaled is a member of the Marxist Palestinian group, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And she was part of a team that hijacked TWA Flight 840 as it was flying from Rome to Tel Aviv, and then they diverted it to Damascus in 1969. No one was injured in that hijacking, but they did blow up the aircraft's nose. So then she underwent plastic surgery to her face to mask her identity and went back for another hijacking the following year in 1970. So that was an attempted hijacking of LL Flight 219. She was actually arrested as a result of that and then later released as part of a prisoner hostage exchange. Now, today she's about to turn 80. Most recently, she's made controversial comments describing Hamas terrorists as freedom fighters, and the Green Left have booked her in to speak at their Ecosocialism conference in June in Perth. But in order to appear, she would need a visa from the Australian government.
So how does the Australian government make that decision?
Yeah, look, in this case, it's all about passing character requirements. So the central question is the applicant of good character? And the way to pass this is to prove that you don't, say, have a substantial criminal record, that you're not a member of an organisation with connections to criminal conduct, can't have domestic violence convictions, and perhaps, pertinently in this case, vilify a segment of the Australian community or incite discord in the Australian community or in a part of it. There's also this aspect about international relationships, which we spoke to Ben Watt about. He's an immigration lawyer, so I'll throw to him.
If it is going to cause a diplomatic incident, for example, it might be disruptive to our relationships with the United States or Israel or the country that was associated with the original hijacking. I think it was Italy. If it is going to cause an incident that's sufficient, DFAT also has a capacity to veto the application. And if that happens, then Home Affairs really doesn't have a capacity to grant the visa.
So criminal conduct, domestic violence, that's pretty clear-cut stuff. But good character, what that means, is it actually clear what that is and how this process works behind closed doors?
Yeah, look, the definition is very broad. Even if you look at the Department of Home Affairs website and their guidelines on character, there's an awful lot that is fairly open to interpretation. So it's pretty vague. So let me bring back in Ben Watt here.
Fair bit of that information is rather opaque because they don't want to really disclose how they make those internal decisions because, of course, that might give people an idea as to how to get around them.
So Khaled has this history of being involved in airplane hijackings, incredibly serious criminal offending, but also she's considered in some regions as being an icon of Palestinian liberation. Certainly she's a political figure as well as a criminal one. Is much of this then caught up in the politics of what's happening now in Gaza?
Yeah, look, it seems so. Ben Watt told us that Khaled's activism in recent decades could work both for and against her application to come to Australia. Look, certainly the government will be considering her past criminal conduct as well as her right to political communication, or in other words, whether she should be let in as a nod to the importance of free speech. So here's Ben.
If you look at when the legislation was drafted, freedom of communication and political expression is something that is an international political right, and that is something that decision makers take into account. That is something where they are going to initially be inclined to allow her to come in and say what she would like to say. However, that needs to be balanced against the responsibility of the Australian government, and they are required to take this into account, which is that the risk of harm, that if this person comes in, is it going to stir up anti-Semitic violence?
So has the government made any statements about her possible entry into the country?
No, look, we approached Home Affairs about this and they've come back to say that they don't comment on individual cases. The last I checked, Leila Khaled hadn't yet applied for a visa. But overall, in the statement from Home Affairs, they say that the Australian government will continue to act decisively to protect the community from the risk of harm posed by individuals who choose to engage in criminal activity or behaviour of concern, including visa cancellation or refusal where appropriate. And then they pointed me to the requirements of the Migration Act, including those character requirements that we've just discussed earlier.
So she hasn't, as far as we know, applied for a visa, but she'll obviously need one to get into Australia if she wants to get here by June.
That's right.
Yeah. Leila Khaled is not the only controversial public figure the government has either refused entry to or kicked out of the country, or there's some question as to whether they'll be able to get in because of a visa. Take us through some of the others.
Yeah, look, the most recent one that you might remember is tennis player Novak Djokovic in 2022. So he was deported for what the Morrison government said was failing to get vaccinated or to get a valid medical exemption to COVID vaccination, or for failing to fill in travel documentation or a character requirement. All of these things were offered as excuses at the time. It wasn't quite clear what the actual reason was. But he's since come back and played tennis again since then, so things have eased up. And then there was the far-right commentator Milo Yiannopoulos. So he was banned for comments he'd made against Islam following the Christchurch mosque shootings in 2019. He reportedly described Islam as a barbaric, alien religious culture on social media. So although he had been granted a visa, it was then withdrawn on those grounds. In 2018, the government declined to approve a visa for US whistleblower Chelsea Manning. She'd spent 7 years in prison, as we know, for leaking classified military and diplomatic documents to WikiLeaks. And some others, Holocaust denier David Irving, rapper Snoop Dogg over criminal convictions, British commentator Katie Hopkins for her behaviour while in isolation for COVID, R&B singer Chris Brown, anti-vaxxer Ken Heckenlively, and ex-boxer Mike Tyson.
How much does it matter whether or not any of these people are let into the country, given the fact that we can all easily see what they say and do on social media at any time?
Absolutely. It's a very valid question. There's also the chance that if Khaled can't enter the country, she might not even be able to appear online at the event. However, Ben Watt flagged that there could be a backlash and it could actually generate more interest if she isn't allowed into the country.
And in fact, it might be amplifying her message. By preventing her from entering, it might be sort of drawing a lot of attention to it. In fact, this might very well have been purposeful.
So kind of the Barbara Streisand effect.
Indeed.
I should explain. The Barbara Streisand effect was when someone took a photograph of her house and about 4 or 5 people saw it on the internet. She then sued to take that off the internet, and then hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of people saw the photo as the result of her trying to get it off the internet.
Yeah, backfired that.
That did backfire. Okay, Claire, well, thanks so much for explaining all that. Really fascinating subject.
Thanks, Bension.
That was our investigations editor, Clair Weaver, and also special thanks to immigration lawyer Ben Watt. That's all we have time for today. Thanks for joining us. And if you did enjoy this episode and what we do here at The Briefing, please make sure that you click subscribe or follow, share our episodes with your friends, have a chat with people about us. We really do appreciate it. We'll be back in your feed from 6 a.m. tomorrow. I'm Bension Siebert. Thanks for joining us.